Chapter 8. Nature and Art in Singing. When I use the term art in relation to singing, I should like it to be understood in this sense: that music produced by the human voice is a natural expression of life just as much as the song of the bird. And while to an extent this expression is spontaneous and instinctive, yet through the desire to express by the voice and with continued practice, one may go on developing far beyond anything that was deemed possible in the beginning. Art does not make the voice, but art assists in getting the best possible production from the voice. At times, a person not in possession of a beautiful voice may use his art to such a degree as to produce a more pleasing effect upon people than could another person with a more beautiful voice who lacks artistic expression. It is plainly the duty of anyone who wishes to sing in a thoroughly artistic manner to use all the means at his command to bring about the desired end. But too often the mistake has been made of wanting to hurry in order to get results in the shortest possible time. Everything in life that is really worthwhile acquiring is done through intelligently directed effort. An undue straining may defeat or retard the thing we most desire. Everything in the nature of strain or undue tension used by the one who wishes to sing will interfere with the true development of the singing voice. It is far better to train the voice first of all, within a comparatively small compass, than to try to sing low notes that are ugly and high notes that are thin and strained. The singing student should try to put beauty of tone into every note, and until he is able to do that, he must go on using the notes in which beauty of tone is perfected so that later there will come the same beauty and perfection into the higher tones. The human voice is a whole orchestra of musical instruments and must always, in the highest sense, be greater than any one or any number of musical instruments. While the instrumental musician may be able to awaken, to a marked degree, man's inner feelings, yet, after all, the voice is the living instrument and can be made to respond to every emotion in a way that no instrument can. Therefore, I would give the voice the first place in health restoration. Do not think for a moment that I underestimate the value of instrumental music or its power to affect the emotional nature of the human mentality. Personally, I have derived enormous benefit, both of soul and mind, through listening to a fine orchestra, or a great organ, or music produced through other instruments of any kind. I can well conceive that there are times when instrumental music may prove of as great value to a patient as that produced by the voice, if not even greater, because many voices might not be so well attuned to the patient's needs, nor able to meet those needs to the degree that a thoroughly trained and highly sympathetic instrumental musician would. The singer who would heal through his voice must be a psychologist of the first order, one who is able to perceive the needs of his patient, and through such perception be able to reach his patient's thought and feeling with music especially adapted to the requirements of the case. All other things being equal, I maintain that it will be through the use of the singing voice that the best results will obtain for both mind and body. The human voice may be made the means of carrying more of the inner feeling and best thought to the mentality of another, in a more direct and subtle way than could ever be done by the instrumental musician. I can see, however, that happy combinations in connection with the voice might be made, such as piano, violin, cello, and harp accompaniments, wherein the voice and the instruments might give happier results than either one alone. The singer who would heal people of either mental disturbances or physical infirmities, or both, should bring to his work as much of physical health and strength as it is possible for him to express, as much of the joy and the optimism of life as he can feel and think, as much of intuitive and intelligent perception of music as he has been able to develop or acquire. He should be thoroughly in love with his work, and his chief aim and object should be to awaken and bring to his work all his spiritual, mental, and physical powers, in order to be truly helpful to those who need his help. He should understand that his body and every part of it should be used in the production of music. If he keeps his whole body in a state of elasticity, his music will have far greater resonance and beauty and purity of tone than if he were thinking solely of technique with little or no regard for his organism. Technique has its own value, but that value may be overestimated, and the singer who is going to prove the most successful will only acquire technique in order to forget it. For everything that is once made thoroughly clear to the conscious mind is ever after pictured in the subconscious mind and stands ever ready to bring back to consciousness whatever is needed at any and every occasion, if the conscious mind does not become too active in its effort to recall it. I repeat what I have already said elsewhere, that after the habit of doing anything in a right way is once established, It is far easier to express through that habit than in any other possible way. When one comes to sing, everything in reference to technique should be put out of the conscious mind. The music and the words of the song, for the time being, are the all-important things, and the singer should become so absorbed in his song as to forget everything else. We can do only one thing well at a time. Perfect concentration is needed as much in singing as in anything else we do. All thought of breath control, form molds, vocal cords, and everything relating to the physical should be forgotten in order to make the singing a thoroughly spontaneous flow of song produced without undue effort or physical tension. For only thus can one hope to produce purity and beauty of tone. Self-consciousness in a singer or instrumental musician is fatal to the best production. If one is doing the very best one can, what difference does it make if some think well and others think ill? Besides, were the singer Israfel himself, he would not be able to please and charm everybody. There would be some who would decry or try to underrate his song. It is far better for the singer or the musician to feel and know in his own heart and mind that he has done the very best it was possible for him to do in his work than to have the plaudits of the multitude and, at the same time, to know that he might have done better. Self-consciousness is perhaps the greatest fault that many singers and musicians have to deal with. It too often stands in the way of their success. It is a very subtle phase of selfishness, and the sooner it is overcome the better it is going to be for both the performer and the listener, because the performer can only give of his best work when he is thoroughly absorbed in the giving. I have known many singers who spent much of their time and money going again and again to throat specialists to have their throats treated. If the same time had been expended in an effort to control their own superficial thoughts and emotions, their throats would have required no such physical treatment. For throat specialists depend for their practice largely upon those who give way to irritability and other superficial emotions. There is nothing that will disturb the singing voice and produce irritation of the vocal cords to the same degree that anger and irritability do. Next to that, worry and anxiety produce a similar result, and with any or all of these adverse conditions the tendency of the voice, whether it be that of the speaking or singing voice, is to drop back in the throat, and in doing this the vocal cords are affected so that all beauty and purity of tone is lost. Loss of vitality through overwork or undue mental or physical tension will give the same results in a lesser degree. The human voice is like a violin that must be constantly kept in tune in order to produce the best music, and one of the greatest attuning factors in life is to feel the joy and the brightness of living. The singer who is bright, joyous, and happy will always be in condition to impart to the lives of others something of the brightness, the joy, and the happiness that animate and permeate his own life. His music goes out from him in melodious, rhythmic, harmonious vibration and sets up, to a degree, the same kind of vibration of rhythm, melody, and harmony in the lives of all who respond to his music. I have often heard the expression used that this or that person's voice is as hard as nails. Sometimes this hardness of voice is the result of poor training, or again it may come from the singer's own nature. The voice is bound to tell its own story through the use of its harmonics. All the spiritual, mental, and physical characteristics of the singer enter into its production. It tells what the person has felt, thought, and been. Every characteristic is expressed by the tones of the dominant harmonics in each voice. Even in the speaking voice, the trained ear of a good judge of human nature can detect the true or the false by listening to the spoken word. Often in listening to singing one feels the enthusiasm and the emotion of the singer, and one is carried away by its persuasive power. Or again, one may feel disdain or distrust in listening to the tone, because it is born of the singer's own insincerity. The singer may wish to carry only beauty of tone expression to the mind of the listeners, but somehow the dominant feelings and thoughts of the singer find expression in the singing voice and carry to the hearer's mind either the impure thought and feeling or the insincere emotional feeling and thought. True feeling is the greatest impulse toward producing beautiful musical tones, and the singer who is dominated by the spirit of love can impart of his or her own spirit to the minds of the listeners. True feeling puts both warmth and color into the voice. The singer must interpret the very soul of music, but in order to do that he must have had soul experience, must have lived the soul life. For we can only put into a voice what the soul has felt and what the mind has thought, and in turn the body must be the plastic, as well as the elastic, instrument through which the music comes. There are teachers of singing who contend that when vocal sound has its perfect position, and when the perfection of mold or form is acquired, every musical tone will become as perfect as the mold. In one way this may be true, but in another way it is far from the truth. A painter might take a pencil, and with it outline on his canvas a picture he intends to paint. However, when he had finished his drawing, no matter how perfect it might be, it could never be a painting until he had used his brush and his paints, and then his picture would glow with warmth and color. One may, to a degree, simulate beauty and color of tone, but the one who feels music knows it to be only a copy of the real, containing nothing of true value in itself. It is desirable in singing to acquire as full a technique in relation to mold and form as possible, so that the singer may have a perfect diction, but diction is not music. It is only a mental and physical effort to give music as good a setting as possible. The one who sings most beautifully will use heart and mind and body, all three in perfect unison to give the full beauty, value, and expression to the song. In singing, as well as in everything else we do in life, the thing that is done in a natural way will not only be done easily, but well. For nature's methods, whether we know it or not, are always the best. Nature gives us the fundamental, and art helps us to build thereon. But true art never conflicts with nature. There is simply a natural reciprocity between the two. All strained and undue effort is unnatural, and no one can hope to get natural effects from unnatural effort. Cause and effect are inseparably bound together. Natural causes give natural effects. Unnatural causes give unnatural effects. I knew of a woman who took singing lessons abroad, who for nearly a year's time had to keep a piece of wood in her mouth in order to keep it open as wide as possible, her teacher insisting that only in this way would she be able to produce a beautiful singing voice. I heard the voice once or twice, and without doubt it was the most disagreeable, discordant singing voice that I had ever heard. It was absolutely lacking in rhythm, melody, resonance, and beauty. I do not mean to say that the teacher was solely responsible for this, but I do say that the teacher's method would be enough to destroy the voice of an angel. Artistic cooperation with nature's ways and means will always prove the most satisfactory in the end. Many people get the impression that, in voice production, a thorough knowledge of the anatomy of all the organs used in singing is necessary to both teacher and pupil. There is so much of this introduced into singing lessons that one might think the teacher should be as skilled in surgery as in the production of a voice, and the student often becomes so confused in the effort to comply with the requirements of the teacher that the technique, seemingly, is built up at the expense of the voice. In doing this, it often happens that one thing of the greatest importance is overlooked, that is, that the student must be taught to listen. Every tone has a purity all its own, but a purity that should harmonize with every other tone. When a tone is perfect, or as nearly perfect as the human voice can make it, the value of it may be carried into the other tones by listening and so getting the ear thoroughly impressed with its sound. In listening to the voices of some singers, one becomes painfully aware that they, the singers, have never heard the inner message of the music they are singing, and no matter how artistically they may sing, or how perfect their technique may be, there is something lacking and the listener is not moved by the music. For music is essentially of the soul, and if it be lacking in soul qualities, no one need expect it to reach the hearts of the listeners. So one should learn to listen to music, not with an active mind, but in a restful mental condition, wherein one can absorb the sound. I have known people who were able to do this to such a degree that after hearing a composition sung once, they had no difficulty in repeating it without making mistakes of any kind. Use the ear to listen to music, but listen with the heart as well, for only in this way can one understand what the music is meant to convey. A singer should always remember that contained within the greater thing is the lesser, and that the form or technique through which music expresses itself is not, and never can be, as great as the music itself, any more than a song can be as great as the singer of it. The soul can make its own form or technique, but the whole technique of music could not make music. I have no wish to underestimate the value of technique in its legitimate place, but the singer whose whole mind is filled with a conscious effort to do everything in the most technical way can never become a spontaneous singer. If the mind is absorbed with the thought of breath control and forms, or molds through which the voice should pass, the voice will become just as mechanical as a musical instrument. Again I say, Technique should only be acquired in order to be forgotten when one begins to sing. It is a trite saying that the highest art conceals art. Often we hear professional elocutionists read, and their art is made to detract from the value of the reading for the simple reason that the listener's mind is quite as conscious of the technique as of the thought and sentiment in the reading. We know that the very best elocution is that in which the listener becomes so absorbed in the subject matter imparted by the reader that he loses sight of all else. I have heard great singers who would so entrance you with their singing that you had really no desire even to look at them, but would choose rather to close the eyes so that nothing might detract from the beauty of the voice. Singing is a natural expression of life. The regrettable thing is that so few people give natural expression in this way to the music that is within them. If they could realize how much singing would add to their own health and happiness, and also the happiness and consequently the health of others, we should hear many more naturally good singers. A thoroughly healthy body, one that is elastic and rhythmic in its movement, forms what we might call the physical basis of singing. I can remember seeing Edwin Booth in one of his plays many years ago, and I shall never forget the elasticity of his body and its beautiful rhythmic movement. One could not but feel in listening to his words and watching his acting that this man was the thorough artist. But back of it all there must have been something more than art. That wonderful, vibrant life would have expressed itself in a thoroughly artistic way even if the artistic side had been left untrained. I do not question for a minute that art added both to the value of his speaking and acting, but another might have had all his art without his greatness. There is a natural beauty of song which need not be a studied art. Sometimes this natural beauty and power may carry fully as much conviction to the hearts and minds of the listeners as the thoroughly trained voice could do. Ira D. Sankey, in his day, was a living exponent of this. All over the world he swayed the hearts and minds of people with the fervor and glow of the religious conviction he put into his songs. The artistic singer might criticize his use of tone production, but could not produce the effects that Sankey was able to produce with his natural singing. The one who would sing well should remember this, that everything that affects his mind or his feelings in a vicious way will interfere with his tone production. In order to retain a beautiful voice, one must live a beautiful life. Because, after all, the most beautiful singing comes when the soul is awakened. It is doubtful whether the world has produced in modern times a more beautiful singer than Jenny Lind, and it is doubtful if any singer of modern times has lived a more beautiful life. The outer revelation of beauty can only come from a person who, in consciousness of both heart and mind, feels, thinks, and lives a beautiful life. Such a life always tends toward greater health and power. Some people have what might be termed a good ear for melody and time. This is always of the greatest help to them, but it can be acquired by people who have not developed it naturally. In order to sing well, one should also speak well. There are some who say that the speaking voice has comparatively little to do with the singing voice, but this is not so. It has far more to do with it than most people imagine. True it is that the speaking voice is generally used to give expression to one's thoughts, and the singing voice to give expression to one's emotions. But in varying degree, both thought and emotion enter into speech and song. Although in singing greater variety of rhythm is required, yet the emotions demanded both in singing and in poetic rendering are alike in quality. All emotions, whether expressed by the speaking or singing voice, require rhythm if one would interpret the emotions aright. Each kind of emotion has its own particular rhythm. Joy should cause the speaking voice to leap and almost sing. In speaking with sadness, one cannot connote words of joy, because sadness requires rhythm full of its own motive, which is slow and complete. The ecstasy that one tries to express through the spoken word takes its rhythm in a quick, rising movement, while mystery may be best expressed by a rhythm that has suspense and restraint, a rising and a falling. We might say it affects speech much in the same way as the use of chromatics in music. The speaking voice cannot interpret emotion in the same degree that the singing voice does, and in all probability the reason for this is that the rhythm of poetry is very limited in comparison with that of song. I believe that the very effort that one makes to sing is an aid to health and happiness. It sets up a more harmonious rate of vibration in the body, and continued singing will help to re-establish such vibration as a natural habit. Everyone should learn to sing, and there are few people in the world who cannot be taught enough about the art of singing to be able to express themselves through the singing voice. The people who cannot do so should try to find such expression through the study of some musical instrument. The world today needs all the music that it can possibly get in order to save it from materialistic thought and to overcome the deep unrest that prevails the world over. Music can be made to preach a gospel of peace and goodwill to all men, a gospel of joy and happiness that will bring glad tidings to the world. I have found among teachers of singing a dogmatism of thought that can hardly be exceeded by any other professional body. Each teacher seems to have a method that differs in some respect from every other method, and each teacher is absolutely certain that his way is the only perfect one. It does not stand to human reason that all these differing methods can be perfect. The probability is that each one may have some one or more elements that are good, and if all these good elements could be brought together, something in the nature of a perfect system might be worked out. But after all, no matter how perfect a system may be, something more than method is required. Music flows from the great oversoul into the lives of those who are receptive to it. If there is no receptivity, then a singing method does not make it. The beautiful, soulful voice is a product of an intuitive, receptive life, a life filled with the higher emotions. Method can never supply anyone with emotions, but it may add greatly to artistic production. It is usually found among teachers of singing that they emphasize some one particular phase of their work more than any other. Perhaps one has studied anatomy or physiology, and, as a consequence, the student has to be instructed in a regular course of both. Again, another teacher has made a great study of breath and its control, and this forms the most important part of his instruction. With another it is resonance, and so we might go on enumerating one thing after another. What the student needs is not the development of any one particular thing, but the use of everything necessary to artistic singing. Some years ago I had the pleasure of meeting a famous Italian pianist and was much surprised, as well as pleased, by his method of instruction. He had 2 pianos in his studio, and if the student, while taking a lesson, made a mistake in technique or interpretation, he would go to the other piano and play the particular passage as it should have been played, instead of immediately pointing out the wrong way, as the majority of teachers do, thereby impressing upon the student's mind the incorrect rather than the only way, the correct way. The result of this was that the pupil's mind was free from the confusion of having 2 ways to consider. I have known some teachers of singing to spend a third of their time in telling their pupils that they were doing things in the wrong way, while if they had employed the same time in showing them how to do things in the right way, the student's mind would not have become filled with fear, neither would it be confused by the 2 ways of doing things. There is one way of doing everything, and that is the right way, and only the right way should be impressed upon the minds of the students. Teachers of singing, as well as all other teachers, need hope to impart to others only that of which they are in possession themselves. There are many teachers who would have to give up their profession and resort to other means for a livelihood if they realize the truth of this. If they wish their students to produce a certain tone or tones, or in fact, whatever the student needs to do, the teacher should be able to do it himself and so set the example. Very often it is a difficult matter for the student to hear his own tones in the same way that he can hear the tones of another. When such is the case, it becomes necessary for the student to listen to the tones and to have the ear impressed by them. If the singing teacher cannot produce the quality of tone he desires from his pupil, then he is not fitted for the vocation he is engaged in. No matter what profession one takes up in life, there must be thorough study and application in order to make that profession a success. Singing, in one respect, is like any other art. Practice helps to make perfect, and one can only hope to become a thoroughly artistic singer through the daily use of the voice. The main thing is that the practice should be regular, but not necessarily of long duration, for I think perhaps that 2/3 of the work attempted by the teacher of singing could be done better in other ways. Breath control is needed in order to sing well. One might take lessons in breathing and learn breath control in a very thorough way without consciously relating it to singing. Or, again, one might make a thorough study of elocution for the development of the speaking voice and so acquire resonance and good diction. In such study, the facial muscles would be developed. Resonance would be brought into the voice, and habits and mold forms established. This might all be done without connecting it in any way with the singing voice, so that when the necessity came for cultivating or developing the voice, the proper habits would already have been established to remain indefinitely. I find too often that the student is thinking about how he is using his hard or soft palate, whether he is using the resonant chambers of his head or whether he is controlling his breath. His mind is divided in its attention, and because of this, he is unable to produce in a beautiful way. One can consciously do only one thing at a time and do it in the very best way. Therefore, when one sings, the whole heart and mind must go into the singing to the exclusion of everything else. For it is only in this way that one may hope to reach the hearts and minds of others. The student of singing should realize that the music is in his soul, and that he is to prepare his body as a fit instrument to give outer voice to his inner feeling. Every tone in the human voice has its own particular power, and can be made to exert its influence upon the hearts and minds of others. The Hindu, in reciting his prayers, very frequently intones to himself one of his most sacred words, Om. The intoning of this word brings to him not only a sense of reverence, but a feeling of power. Furthermore, it develops that wonderful head resonance, which gives richness and color to his speech. The mere use of the word Om might help one to develop resonance of voice, but when one considers its relation to the Supreme Being, then the added thought and feeling produced would add beauty to the richness and color that should go with resonance. Inner feeling has everything to do with the color of the voice. After all, it is an effort to interpret the divine that lives within us. The majority of people fail to understand why one singer moves them to the very depths of their being while another who may have a more beautiful voice awakens no such emotion. We may account for it by saying that one has magnetism and the other is lacking in it. But what is magnetism? The magnetic forces in life are generated by inner feeling. Consequently, the singer who has developed the greatest amount of feeling will be best able to give a record of it through the voice, for the voice can never give out what the life has not experienced. One can never give to the world that which they do not possess. Often we hear bright, fresh, beautiful voices that are produced in a thoroughly artistic way, and while they contain the freshness and, possibly, the innocence of life, yet they are never able to do more than to produce a superficial effect or give a temporary pleasure. They are like the light breezes that play on the surface of the water, causing it to ripple and dance, but they are not like the driving wind that causes the ocean to become a great seething mass of billowy waves ever rising and falling because of the power that is exerted by it. As I have said, every tone to which the human voice can give utterance is filled with a power that is all its own. Think how much that power would mean in life if it were only understood, and then used for the development of the user, and also for the good influence it would exert on others. The singing voice can make us feel more of the innate power of life than possibly any or all other things in life. But we have not understood its power or its possibilities, and have thought of it merely as something to please, something to amuse, something to listen to in order to pass away a pleasant hour or two. We have thought of the sermon or the spoken prayer as forming the principal part of religious services, and of the church music as a sort of ornamental arabesque that is no real or necessary part of the service. But the sermon and the prayer fall far short of giving as true an expression to the divine in man as the great anthem sung by the choir or the entire body of people in unison. For such singing, if done in the spirit of reverence, will awaken a deeper glow of feeling than could any spoken words. Sometime our religious bodies will have shorter sermons and prayers, and much more beautiful music, for music has a transforming power that nothing else in life possesses in the same degree. In another part of this chapter, one have referred to the necessity of attentive listening to the tones one makes with the voice, or the beautiful tones produced by another, and how necessary it is to make each tone beautiful, not to try to make them alike, as that would be impossible to do, for each tone has its own particular rate of vibration, therefore no two tones could be exactly alike. Each tone, in the highest sense, should represent some particular degree of a spiritual attribute or a mental faculty of being. The word register, in relation to voice production, is partially artificial and only partially true. When we speak of a lower, a middle, and an upper register, we are too apt to think of them as purely physical, chest, middle, or palate, and head tones. And if any one of these registers of the voice is weak or uneven, then we try to overcome the physical weakness and establish strength. There is a much deeper way of getting at the truth of this. Unity and Trinity seem to be inseparably related. There is unity at the heart of music, but there is the trinity of rhythm, melody, and harmony necessary to its expression. There is only one life in man, but there is a trinity of expression. spirit, thought, and sense. Or, in another way, soul, mind, and body. Chest notes, or the lower tones in music, correspond to sense or body. Middle or palatal tones to that of mind, and head tones to soul or spirit. The tendency also is from lower to higher tones because through development one is always reaching up from the lower to the higher. Some singers find their notes weak in the lower register. When such weakness occurs, no matter what the voice may be, contralto or soprano, bass or tenor, in some way the physical side of their lives is being neglected. Such neglect might result from excess in eating or drinking, but is even more likely to arise from not enough eating or drinking, or not enough physical exercise. The body is the instrument through which they give expression to their song. If the instrument is not properly used, or if it is misused, it is no longer able to produce true musical tones. Therefore, it is necessary that the body should regain its normal pitch, that it should be tuned through the use of everything necessary to its upbuilding, so that the whole body, as an instrument, may be both elastic and vibrant. The mind is responsible for this condition of body, and it is the mind that is the master and must bring about the true adjustment and supply the body's every need. Next we come to the so-called middle register, which corresponds to mind, and any unevenness in this register shows that the mind is not attuned to life, or at least only partially so. Worry or anxiety produce a disturbing influence, and distraction of any kind will affect the evenness of quality. So there should come that control over one's thoughts that will bring about a state of mental restfulness and poise. With evenness of mental control established, there will come evenness to the middle or throat register. Again, if there is unevenness in the development of the upper register, which really corresponds to soul aspiration, it is because of lack of spiritual development. I do not wish it to be understood by this statement that soul development means what people ordinarily call religion. It has nothing to do with creed or dogma, ceremonial or form, but with a state of feeling. If music is an expression of soul passion, the music must express itself through the feeling of the singer. And if the notes in the register are uneven, then there needs to be a cultivation of one's inner feeling through the use of feeling. For we can exercise our feelings just as much as we can exercise our bodies. We exercise our bodies through physical use, and feeling is also exercised through use. Sometimes we are fearful, and to overcome that, we should cultivate courage. Sometimes the life is filled with doubt. Displace it with hope. Cultivate love through gentleness and kindness. Try to feel quite as much or more than you think. Remember that it is through feeling that the highest musical expression must come. The beauty and purity of the harmonics or overtones of the upper register disclose to the highly attuned person much of the development of the singer. The tree is known by its fruits. Every overtone has its own story to tell, and tells it in no uncertain way. We find, then, that the three registers correspond to three states or three phases in the evolution of man. I do not wish to be misunderstood or to convey the impression that the high tenor and soprano are living any more religious or harmonious lives than the bass and contralto singers. We must look at life, from first to last, as being spiritual, no matter what the plane of expression may be, so that the bass voice that shows evenness and beauty of tone might be indicative of a more perfectly lived life, according to one's ideals, than the tenor with unevenness or lack of quality or purity of tone. I would not have anyone think for a single moment that I would classify people as being either good or bad by the pitch or range of their voices, but people do classify themselves through the beauty, color, and purity of their tone production or lack of it, whether they know it or not. And they do this as infallibly as the thermometer registers the temperature of heat or cold. To the untrained ear, through the use of acquired art, one may be able to cover up a multitude of sins in singing, sins of omission and commission. But to the ear that is attuned to the higher melodies and harmonies of life, there can be no such deception. The person who desires to develop the voice to its full capacity must learn to live in a full and a complete way, must experience the pleasure and joy, happiness and harmony of all three planes, physical, mental, and spiritual, in order to live the whole life that man has been intended to live. He must learn to live on all planes in a thoroughly wholesome, temperate way, in order to be able to enjoy all natural phases of living. He should understand that he is related to the physical plane through his bodily senses, and that the varying needs and requirements of the body should all be fittingly observed. He should be no more the ascetic than the glutton, but live his physical life in a thoroughly poised manner, getting real pleasure from such living. In his mental life, he should learn to cultivate his mind and be able to give clear expression to his thoughts, for the development of beautiful imagination adds greater happiness to his life than does any physical pleasure. His mind should be taught to rule or direct his physical nature, because it is one step higher in the evolution of his life. He should never strain the mind or allow it to become either too relaxed or too tense, because just as sure as the pendulum swings too far in one direction, it must swing correspondingly far in the other. Self-control is something that each one must work for, and only by working for it will it come. Live the mental life to the full. Know as much as it is possible to know, but neither overuse nor underuse the mind and expect to be happy in so doing. Happiness is the result of right mental living. Again, the mind should be under the dominion of the spirit, for the spirit in man is the controlling factor in life. Love and joy, faith and hope, and all qualities kindred to these constitute in man the real dynamic of life, the light that is to illumine the whole life, the power that is to be expressed through everything man does. Remember that all three of these varying phases of life exist all the way from the elemental man up. Only in the elemental man they are rudimentary, while in the highly civilized man they have become a more conscious realization. From first to last, all proceeds from the indwelling spirit. From first to last, it is a state of consciousness, of realizing in part or in whole. It is a mistake on the part of the vocal master or student to think that the voice can be developed through a study of anatomy or physiology. Sooner or later, they will come to see that knowledge of the various planes of life and conformity to the requirements of these planes will bring about the desired end in a shorter time and a better way. Art means making the best possible form through which the tone can be expressed. Ruskin says, "High art consists neither in altering nor in improving nature, but in seeking throughout nature for whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are pure. In loving these, in displaying to the utmost of the painter's power such loveliness as is in them, and directing the thoughts of others by winning art, or gentle emphasis." Art is great in exact proportion to the love of beauty shown by the painter, provided that the love of beauty forfeit no atom of truth. What Ruskin wrote concerning painting, an art that has far less of inner revelation than has music, is also true of music, only in a much greater way. If the painter is not to sacrifice an atom of truth, surely in an art like music, which is the very soul of all arts, there must be far less occasion for any sacrifices. A great singer like Jenny Lind will, first of all, use her voice for the glory of God. God gave her the voice. God gave her the health, feeling, and beauty that lived in her soul, and she glorified God through singing the songs that would enlighten and uplift the souls of men and women. The greatest glory we can render God is loving service to mankind. When composers, singers, and instrumental musicians realize that they are the true prophets and priests of God, then they will try, in order to be of greater service to mankind, to purify both their minds and bodies, thereby fitting themselves to become receptive to the indwelling spirit, and thus be able to render the best service to their fellow man. It is a singular thing that notwithstanding how large a number of the greatest men who ever lived have attached such value to music, the world as a whole today still continues to consider it as something apart from what they call practical living. Surely anything that can change the nature of man or beast, and make the intractable, tractable, anything, too, that can awaken such a sense of joy and satisfaction, must have in it something more practical than the mere pleasure of eating a good dinner or drinking a glass of wine. The trouble is that comparatively few people ever think deeply concerning anything in life. The customary or the conventional thought of the people one associates with is taken for granted, no matter how right or how wrong it may be. It is the easy way that people seek. Why not? They pay their doctors to care for their bodies and clergymen to save their souls. Goethe was right when he wrote, "To customary roads men still will link their faith, poor dolts, imagining they think." It is still more singular that those who are so intimately associated with music, the ordinary composer, the singer, or the instrumental musician, should know so little of the power with which they are dealing, while people like Darwin, Spencer, Schopenhauer, Carlyle, and many other great men whose work did not really come within the province of music, nevertheless were conscious in a far greater way of the magical power and beauty of music than either the musician or the musical critic. Said Carlyle, "Music is a kind of inarticulate, unfathomable speech which leads us to the edge of the infinite and lets us, for moments, gaze into it." Schopenhauer says, "The world is but realized music." He might have gone still farther and said the universe is an expression of divine music, that the morning stars did sing together and have ever continued to sing together, that love and its expression, music, are fundamental to all form, to all expression. When people begin to think, and when they know music better than they do, then the expression of music will be universal. It will not be necessary to teach people how to sing, for all will sing, from the youngest to the oldest, and all life will become realized music. Oh, that the composers and singers, and those who play instrumental music, and the critics of music might be made to realize that the influence and power exerted by them could bring to the life of man such untold satisfaction, such joy and peace, that the whole world might be made to rejoice. If for once they could realize the truth that they have a far greater power than any priesthood, a greater power than the kings of the earth, surely new effort, new aspirations, new desire would come into their lives in order that they might give to music the highest and best expression. This day will come, and it will not be very long delayed, because the old world is ready for a new springtime, a further renaissance, and instead of being ruled by the dead thoughts and forms of bygone ages, it will enter into full universal consciousness of the rhythm, melody, and harmony of celestial music. End of chapter.